Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our discussion today. I see some people who are joining us for the first time, but some of them are really old and dear friends from decades ago, and I haven't seen some of you in a very long time, and it's though I read you. Um, so thank you for joining us today. Um, uh, I picked a poem by someone that probably most of you don't know. He was a Boston poet, um, the partner of the Pulitzer Prize winning biographer Megan Marshall, and he died a few years ago. It was a sad loss. He studied with Robert Lowell, and he published very little, and he kind of gave up on publishing, and then just didn't care very much about whether he published or not. And Megan found a number of manuscripts, and she published them in this really beautiful book called The Blood of San Gennaro. And Scott was someone who went to Naples annually, if not more. And oh, hi, Dan. Um, and Dan, I will tell you, is Dan and his wife Susan are the people who literally introduced me to Scott Harney. And there's a kind of I think a sort of amusing story when uh when friends of yours invite you to a little cocktail party or dinner party and tell you that one of their friends whom you don't know and don't really know anything about is going to read you some of his poems. And you feel you have to go, but your heart sinks because you know what some of these poets are going to be like. Uh, and what a surprise to hear Scott Harney read his poems and how he just really blew us away with the seriousness and depth and elegance uh, of his poems. And he read for, I don't know what, half an hour or 20 minutes. And suddenly we found a new poet that we were suddenly all of us, everyone in the literary community who was at that very lovely dinner party, uh, that we had, you know, that we had made a new discovery of someone we really wanted to read. And then that was in 2015, I believe. And then when when this book came out, it was another revelation because there were so many good, really wonderful, remarkable poems in it. So let me let me read Climbing Mount Vesuvius to you. and then we can talk about it. Climbing Mount Vesuvius. Not the mythic hike you might imagine, nymphs and satyrs flitting about the steamy slopes, a distant hiss of orange lava just about to spill over the crater's edge. Not the grand tour trip via funicular, ladies fanning off volcanic dust as the tram groans to the cone. Just a ride by air-conditioned bus through the slanted suburbs at the base, up through fields of weeds, clotted with tar from a recent eruption. Perhaps that spurt in 44, a fart in the face of packing fascists. Halfway up, we stop at a souvenir shop where Gregorio, his hair ash white beneath a black leather cap, explains in several languages that he alone is the keeper of Vesuvius and will sell you glossy books of hot red shots. For nothing more, he'll sign the flyleaf, adding a sketch of his charge, the smoking mountain on the bay, the usual view from Posillipo. The driver checks his watch. Perhaps he hears a distant rumble that signals magma rising, enough to melt down half of Naples. Or perhaps his stomach says it's time for lunch. He drops us near the summit for the last ascent, by the parking lot and toilets, snack bar and more stuff for sale, necklaces of lava and a wine called Tears of Christ. I came to see the fires of hell and find instead a rest stop on the way to heaven. But up ahead, a wide path rises, filled with pilgrims streaming toward the rim. And so I follow, the sky spreading wider over my head, and land now falling away, the crater on one side, the sudden sea on the other, the way between forever narrowing. The great abyss today is just a gravel pit with a few small fissures letting off steam, but still no place for a picnic. Just stay steady for the walk ahead, to a shack on the narrowest edge, where they sell limoncello for €1 a shot, and you sway between the crater and the rest of the world, deciding where to fall. Well, any first thoughts on reading the poem or hearing it? Richard, is that your hand up? Richard Hoffman? No, okay. But glad to see you. Denise.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
Uh, the the poem took me on a true journey, which is made whimsical by the play of the music, especially with vowel sounds, which I think is traceable to the word Vesuvius, which has 4 different vowel sounds.
Mhm.
But that provides a playfulness, as do many of the descriptions, on the way to a fiery abyss. So so the ascent to the abyss is is kind of a drop. I mean, we know we're going up Vesuvius, even though it's, becomes something of a tourist trap, but there's the fiery abyss. Anyway, my initial.
Oh, you just cut yourself you just cut yourself off from the sound. Well,
That's because I had said enough. Those were my first reactions.
thank you. Thank you. Ted.
Oh, this is really a brief follow-up to Denise's comment that there are places in the poem which are filled with a certain uh, consonants, I'm sorry. So steamy slopes, distant hiss, just spill, groans, slanted suburbs, base, fascists, and those ongoing S's sort of lean toward the hiss that he talks about later on. And the S sound is a long, kind of dangerous sound, and they're all over the inside of this work.
Yeah. I I it's all the way through the poem, isn't it?
It is
All that consonants and assonants, even in the first line,
exactly.
the mythic hike you might imagine, the nymphs, steamy. What and is it a kind of playfulness?
I like that. Yeah.
Is it anything more than that? I mean, I like playfulness. Uh, uh, Richard, and you're on mute.
Yeah, it
Dave.
seems to me that playfulness begins right in the first line or two, because we're what the dynamics of that playfulness have to do with the disappointment that's in the. It's not this mythic understanding of Vesuvius, and it's not any of the things that one would expect if you were. Uh, I don't know what I'm trying to say. You're uh, the whole mythic hike that you might imagine, the distant hiss of orange lava, not the grand tour trip by a funicular, just a ride by air-conditioned bus, and then it goes on, you know, juxtaposing Tears of Christ, which is, of course, just a pedestrian whine, and there are other poems in that book of Scott's that take have a similar strategy where the inflated is deflated with some humor in the poem, and puts us back squarely in the real world by the end of the poem.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's playful, on the face of it, that's playing with the way we're perceiving uh, something as mythical as Vesuvius, which is also just a real place that is exists as an aftermath.
Yeah. I might also add that the the fantasy of Vesuvius is also kind of comic. The
Yeah.
the nymphs and satyrs and the ladies fanning off volcanic dust on a funicular, um, as the tram. One of my favorite sound moments in the poem is groans to the cone, uh, and in the end of line 6, and that line break and the oh sound, you can almost hear the train, uh, the funicular, um, groaning, trying really hard to reach that upper landing. Um,
Lloyd,
yes.
Ellen
Oh,
Tremper.
Ellen. Hi. Yeah. Hi.
Hello. The other poetic force in the poem is its enjambment. There's a tremendous amount of it, and it suggests. I mean, I'm going to be political, but
Okay. Please feel free.
if you don't mind,
No, I don't mind at all.
the ascent up the mountain is one after another embrace of capitalism or efforts at profit, which of course is an irony considering the destruction of the town, but not, as I will tell you all later. I know something about the aftermath of Vesuvius that is not in the poem, but interesting in relation to the way in which he uses the one after another disappointment that capitalism wreaks in this poem for the people who are looking for some kind of authentic experience, and instead not even finding a funicular, but instead an air-conditioned tool bus. I'll say no more.
Oh, I hope you'll have more to say afterwards, later. Kathy? Oh, you're muted.
I wanted to apologize. I'm still having trouble. The raise hand thing isn't coming up automatically, and so the control off was confusing. But I mean, in addition to everything everyone said, it's sort of a poem of disappointing comparisons, although they're whimsical because they start up so inflated with the nymphs and the satyrs, which then turn into pornography, a little bit further down. So things as he gets more and more up the Vesuvius, things seem to get kind of pulled down, as people have been saying, to the quotidian, and then it sort of changes, which I really admire. Right after he makes fun of himself a little bit, I came to see the fires of hell and find instead a rest stop on the way to heaven. And then he's got that but, and things seem to turn a little bit, even though the great abyss is just a gravel pit, and they're selling Lamello. At the end, he's there between the crater and the rest of the world, deciding where to fall. So I have this feeling, that he's been sort of shook up by this, and he's trying to figure out where he's gonna be. So despite all the whimsy and the irony and the references, it comes down to a fairly dramatic moment, although not overdone at the end. And I really admire that ability to juggle those tones.
Are you moved by that ending?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. As am I. That
Oh God.
yeah. Um um, oh, Meredith, do you want to hear what can
I'll try. I may get interrupted. I agree. I think towards the end of the poem, he leaves, or he more forcefully interweaves some real longing with the irony. What I wrote is, I hear a longing for the sensuality of myth, and interwoven with all the quotidian and commercial elements, a gradual discovery of the spirit experience he desires when he finds, quote, the way between forever narrowing, end quote. By the end, he sways like the swooning Victorian ladies. And I hear something Dante-esque too in this idea of the pilgrim streaming to the top. as well as ironic. So he's really blending beautifully these two.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. Uh the print on the chat is too small for me to read. Uh
I understand that.
uh so thank you. Um Alisa.
Isn't that suicidal, that last clause, deciding where to fall, if it is a clause? Isn't that
Yeah.
suicidal?
How would you describe that?
Well,
You
I
mean
mean,
just
one
in
way
the
of,
sense of just and of where to just the idea of
one
falling
one
off.
way one way of reading fall would be deciding which side I'm on,
Yeah,
where I land properly. But
yeah,
it's kind of a shocking last line because it
yeah,
also says, "Should I fall into the crater and immolate myself?" You know, so it seems quite suicidal.
yeah, or fall off the mountain and
Yeah, or fall that way.
yeah, or fall that way. Yeah. Katha did I see a little hand motion? I'm
No,
dying to
no,
hear what you
but
have to say.
well, I was very interested in this poem. Sometimes I wonder, though, what that old question, what makes a poem specifically?
Yeah.
To me, the line breaks seemed a little arbitrary. I could imagine this as a prose paragraph, and he just, put some lines in there. And one place where that maybe I'm disagreeing with Ellen here, that there are all these enjambments. I'm not so sure that some of them work. They seemed a little arbitrary. So, for example, uh, sorry,
It's okay.
there just seemed, well, I can't find them now, but places, oh, I know, it's between like a verb and the preposition that goes with it. So just about to spill over the
Over
crater.
the edge.
I could sort of see that one. But then there are the ladies fanning off volcanic dust, there were a lot of those, and I don't know how well that what they add. Maybe because I always do my lines more by sound. And sometimes you want to break up a rhythm, but I didn't know always what he was doing. I'd love to hear what other people think.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I think
All right, fine.
I have a kind of answer to that myself, but Richard?
No, I'm sorry. I was chasing the dog off my lap.
Okay. Uh, you don't have to. Um, anyone have an answer or comment agreeing or not agreeing? Denise?
I think that this poem is substantially driven by sound. And I, in that particular passage, arranged to draw attention to the fun of dust, just, and buzz in rapid sequence. I think that's as much a form of fun in this poem as having a spurt that's a fart in the face, slanted suburbs at the base. What else is here? I've got this all annotated by sound, which of course stop at the souvenir shop. Glossy books of hot red shots. Um, and then pornography and molten stone. It's all music. And the music has a lot of funny lyrics.
Ellen.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
When you read it, you left out the half line about pornography. Were you aware of that?
Oh, no, I wasn't.
Okay. And the second question is the double space between forever narrowing and the great
Oh,
abyss. Is the poem printed like that, or does that the great abyss represent a line break that you did not catch and simply showed as a space, a double space between
well,
parts of the poem?
yeah, let me tell you that I was reading it from the book, and the version that I sent you was the version that Megan Marshall originally sent me. So, those things, those places that you mention, and which I hadn't really noticed, um, are
It seems
um,
that
are they're different between the draft version that's in my computer, which was easier to send you, than what may be a more finished version in the book.
how is it in the book
Well, those things aren't in here.
at all?
Uh, yeah, I think I didn't leave anything
Okay.
out that I was aware of.
It's the book is censored.
Ha. Well, I'm gonna have to find out about that.
And what about the double space? I think that's more significant.
This is it in the book, it's just one column.
Oh, I see. So there's no double space there. Because it reads, and as I read it, there is a real break in feeling, starting with the great abyss seems a kind of explanation of everything that has come before, or I should say a summing up.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a change in tone at that point.
Yeah, I have to look at that. Um, because uh, I didn't take in that there was a difference between these two versions. And do you prefer the version you have?
One always prefers what one starts with.
Right. 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 Um, well, that's very interesting. Richard, you're muted again.
I also think that line is wonderful because the idea of myth and porn um, are and the relationship between them, the way that they are similar, has to do with the portrayal of reality that's equally false in both of those. And and there's a coming back to earth at the end of the poem. Uh, but the coming back to earth has no certainty in it either. It's still a question of, do I want to pump this up with all of the mythical stuff, or do I want to stay with the experience of having taken a bus ride up a mountain and been disappointed?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, something that um no one's mentioned yet um is is the what form the poem is mostly in, not completely, but almost completely. Denise, are you?
There's a lot of iambic pentameter.
Yeah, it's mostly a kind of loose iambic pentameter. And I don't know, it reminds me a little of well, I don't know, maybe this is just too strange, but it reminds me a little of Coleridge's conversation poems. The sort of that's a little stricter in the iambic pentameter, but that it they it wants to me it seems to want to have a sort of central column of versification, of traditional versification, with a lot of kind of play in it, and play, in both senses of the word. And that the iambic, the pentameter column, the more or less pentameter column, um, uh, I don't know, gives it a kind of fundamental seriousness. There's a kind of fundamental seriousness to me, and along with all the playfulness about it. Irina, your hand is up.
I could but recall Elizabeth Bishop's 2000 illustrations in complete concordance.
Yeah.
And this opposition of looking and seeing.
Yeah.
Of course, tourism, but there is also another level. I completely agree with Dante, with the Dante allusion. Not the obvious, not only the obvious, the ascent and descent and mentioning of heaven and hell and
Yeah.
like that, ascending and falling, but this geometry in Dante. There is this widening and narrowing, and there is this place where suddenly this very understated tone becomes more and more unsettling and becomes extremely unsettling in the last line where there is this balancing on the ridge. Yes, very, you can read different things into it. And this spreading, the sky spreading wider over my head, and light now falling away, the crater on one side, the sudden sea on the other, this narrowing and widening. I don't know, I just thought of Dante, and that's quite remarkable, I think.
Mm-hmm. I want to agree with Katha, because I take you very seriously.
Oh dear.
That there's a kind of youthful oh, Bill, I will get to you in just a second. That there's a kind of youthful, sort of poetry class, learning about line breaks and learning to be sort of a little playful about line breaks and have something come as a surprise, and that some of those places work better than others, but that finally what what really what I take seriously about the poem is how moved I am by it, by this kind of almost allegory, that this little tourist adventure becomes. And so there are little things that I regard as minor that are very easy for me to forgive, because the whole thing has a kind of seriousness to it, and genuine feeling about what does one do with one's life? And what is this little tourist thing, up Vesuvius, and that it becomes a kind of allegory. Um, Something like that. Bill, Gesundheit.
Excuse me. Thank you. Yeah, I'm having trouble uh, um, agreeing with the general sort of approbatory tone that people are
Okay.
adopting. I think I don't know whether it's a blind spot of mine. I can't quite see the quality in it. I mean, I think it's well written and sharply observed, and there are some nice verbal felicities. I like letting off steam, that way in which the dead metaphor is revived by the use of the phrase in a context which makes it literal. But I found the early part of the poem where it's sort of faintly mocking of the Italians' commercialization of their natural resource. Uh, Almost irritating in the way it tilts at a
Mm.
rather obvious target.
Mm.
And I think Denise began by saying that she saw the poem as taking us on a journey, as it were, into the unknown. But I found the turn at the end a little bit predictable after its beginning with its sort of observations about you know, the high-flown myths one might entertain beforehand, and it then, as it were, disenchants those. I thought that some kind of retrieval of the mythic or the heroic was almost inevitable at the end, so that final turn
Mm.
doesn't take us by surprise in the way that it thinks it's going to take us by surprise. I mean, are any of these animate versions at all legitimate, or am I just missing the thing?
Well, they're what you're feeling from the poem.
Yeah,
I don't think you're manufacturing that. But I have to say, I don't feel it that way. Um,
right.
that
One
I,
thing could you try and explain um, why you find the ending moving, this sort of when he's poised, uncertain in which direction to fall? I understood Lee's
Oh, Bill, you froze.
reading of that, that both options seem. Oh, sorry. Um,
You froze
uh,
for a
uh,
second. We missed you.
oh, oh, am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yes. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was wondering if Lloyd or somebody could tell me why the ending is as moving as they take it to be. I can see that it's unusual, this moment where he's poised between two different ways of falling, and as it were, um, tries to decide between them, both of which Lisa took to be suicidal in one way or another. But I sense, Lloyd, that you saw it differently, and I did, but I didn't quite understand what you were driving at.
um, I, Let me ask Mike what he was going to say,
Sure.
and I will come back to your question
Okay.
if Mike doesn't answer it.
Right.
Actually, Bill's comments were sort of leading me toward it, and the vagueness is what has kept me from speaking because normally I'm looking for something pretty sharp and incisive to talk about when I talk about a poem. But the thing I note, yeah, the downplay of Vesuvius, uh, the deadpanning of great things is so American and we love it, etc. What the author I think misses, or maybe we don't get, Vesuvius happens all at once at a moment in history and is a calamitous event for the civilized world around Rome. And I mean, and nothing, I mean, yeah, I don't know what he keeps talking about heaven. It was one of the off things for me. Um, as the modern commercial world makes even sort of paradisal stabs at really hellacious things in history. I suppose what's instigating or pushing me today to even speak is what I notice is the torpor of the speaker toward the world, and it's a world in which dramatic things can happen and around us today. Extremely dramatic things are happening with humanity, but we are so far away from it, we cannot pull our heads out. And it seems to me you get the chance of Vesuvius as a historical lesson to say how quickly an idle, leisurely, taking everything for granted sort of life is suddenly obliterated. So again, I don't want to be ranting politics or end of the world or anything here, but the thing that bothered me immensely was the authors taking a moment or an emblem of history and completely forgetting what that historical moment meant, actually meant. I mean, he lost it. He does exactly, I think, what the tourists are doing to it. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm probably ranting and forgive me, but I have the thing to say is that he missed the real historical significance of what he might have brought out in the poem. Unless that poem, and if the poem's a metaphor for what is coming or whatever, I don't know. But I'm struck in a very present sense at listening to what I hear on the BBC every night and waking up to what I see going on in America. Gas at $4.60 and no great protests. There are no clashes with authority. We're letting a present completely bogus authority basically just walk over our chests. We go out by the thousands in protest, and I mean that's what we can do legally, but nothing is moving for the egregious things that are happening in the world today. It's like we're not even part of it. We're just like observers behind glass. So I guess the poem disappoints me in that it missed something very dramatic in a historical sense. Of course, it's deadpan, it's a gravel pit or whatever. It's disappointing, but there's no vision of what Vesuvius meant to history where he could have had a chance. I guess I'll end my rant there. I'm sorry, guys. That was what on my mind. I was trying to say something I thought was important.
Yeah. To me, it was a relief that that was not in the poem. That's sort of what I would have expected. And that it's much more, Ellen, yeah. You're muted. Still
Ellen?
muted.
Now,
There it is.
There you are.
as we've been talking, I've been thinking about Euro shot at the very end of the poem. For €1, you get a shot of this drink, and I suddenly thought of the world is too much with us, late and soon getting and spending. And the difference between that sonnet and this poem is that there is some sort of redemption at the end, or an alternative. And I don't see the deciding on which side to fall, into the crater or down the slope, is anything like that moment of reprieve that Wordsworth gives us. And maybe that's what Richard, I think, was saying, or I'm sorry, forgive me, who was the person who started that line of reasoning?
It sounded like Richard.
But then somebody else spoke after he did. Anyway, there were two people who seemed to be feeling the same thing. And anyway, I am giving what might have been an ending, which would have made me feel more. I felt irony, but no real feeling at the end.
Denise?
Thank you. Like you, I was grateful that there was no reference to the most famous eruption of Vesuvius, because that would have seemed tendentious to me. And I think that the eruptive potential of the volcano appears all the way through. The volcanic dust is falling from somewhere. The field is clotted with tar from a recent eruption. The usual view is the smoking mountain on the bay. Perhaps the keeper hears a distant rumble that signals magma rising enough to melt down half of Naples, which is pretty much in the exact middle of the poem. So I feel the volcano erupting all the way through it, and not just once at the most recorded moment of its history. And I also find the end ambiguous. I feel like there's more than one way to fall between the abyss and the rest of the world. And in fact, it could be into the limoncello stand. There's no limit to the potential ways of fall.
Yeah, that I mean, as I said, for me, what I find moving is the way I don't know what I keep thinking of as a kind of allegorical element of the poem. Just stay steady for the walk ahead. It's someone, it seems to me it's someone facing some kind of crisis, and who wants to keep steady, but who has this sense that one way or another he's going to fall off the mountain, either into the crater or into the rest of the world. And Ellen, what we I see you had a comment that went by before I could read it.
Oh, I just wrote that I was thinking about the dust on the dust falling on the tourists in the bus as a kind of sad reflection on what the world has become. It's certainly better than being smothered in lava.
Right. Yeah.
But it's again, the world is, there's a sense of decay brought by economic forces that and cultural forces that have reduced significance tremendously. I was very struck by the comment that, of course, you didn't have it in your version, but the relationship between the nymphs and satyrs and pornography. That is another version of the way in which some kind of forceful interpretation of sexuality has been also list pornographic representations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jane was wanting to add
Oh,
something.
Jane. Yeah, please.
Yes, Lloyd, do you know when this poem was written? I asked to better understand the historical context in which Harney was living at the time.
Well, Dan, do you know? I would think at least 30 years ago. Does that sound plausible to you?
Do you think it was pre 9/11 then, Lloyd?
Oh, absolutely.
Pre
Decades
9/11.
before
Okay.
9/11.
Not
Or
decades.
a decade before 9/11 or more. Dan?
No.
No. Lisa? Oh, Yehudi. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yehudi and then Lisa.
I mean, you can date it by the reference to the euro.
Okay. So
when did the European Union begin its command and the use of the euro?
So when would that have been?
I think it's maybe 20, 25 years ago or so, not more.
Not more than that.
Yes, more than that. January 1st, 2002.
Well,
okay. So
a
little more.
I have something else. On January 1st, 1999, the euro became the official currency of 11 European Union member states.
So the poem might be post 9/11 then, I mean.
No, I don't think so. Well, I can't tell you. Richard.
Well, I'm going to move dangerously into the biographical here, but I was at that same party with you, Lloyd, that you spoke of when we began, and had the same trepidations, and was equally rewarded. But it seems to me that my experience of Scott is that he was continually facing his mortality because of his weak heart and condition. And I mean, he was carrying around a little electronic box that he said, "Oh, I depended on this little box for my life." And I see the poem shadowed by that knowledge of Scott. And I think of something Ellen said about Wordsworth, and there's almost a yearning, at least in the beginning of the poem, and it follows through, a kind of yearning for that. I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn, than be on this goddamn air-conditioned bus. And it reduces everything to such a pedestrian level that it offends his imagination. But he has to wrestle between those two things, because by the end of the poem, he's really trying to figure out where he's going to lay his body down. Am I going to fall into the crater, or am I on the side of the limoncello vendor? Is there no more than this pedestrian life? I want there to be more, but I also see through that, so I can't see where to fall. And that's how I'm reading the quest of the poem, was to find some balance between those things.
Yeah, thank you. That I think you're being more articulate than I've been about what I'm feeling in the poem. And does that mean we're affected too much by what we know about Scott, or yeah. Meredith, and then Lisa, and then Meredith.
Well,
Lisa?
I heard some criticism of the poem, starting with Katha Pollitt's comments about the enjambment being imperfect. And we thought about it as a student poem in a way. And it is disappointing to me too. I was particularly disappointed by the word fart in there. And I'm wondering if others felt that too. It's almost like an offensive, well, it's definitely a word meant to refer to something offensive to the nose and to the ear. And it's, a bodily function. And I know you can get everything into a poem, Marianne Moore,
Yeah.
but that fart as a description of what's propelled from the crater's mouth is is kind of a shock to read, and there's something grotesque about it. So, but I don't want to be too prudish or priggish about poetry either. But I would say that um, I I also have a question about the fascists, the packing fascists. I'm thinking there must have been a slight eruption when fascists were climbing up the mountain in 1944, but I'm not sure. I was disappointed too with the return to the vendors at the top of the mountain. I thought we were moving into a more sublime height at the end when he seems but the streams of pilgrims, and then we're sort of going on a narrowing cone up to the peak. And I felt that we were lifting off, maybe like with Wordsworth, into something more sublime. And to have the vendor of limoncello up there, even if he was up there, unless you're making a different kind of comment, I don't want to see that limoncello vendor up there. But on the other hand, I think to say maybe it's not a perfect poem, but it has an awful lot going on, and it's a good one for study because there's so much interesting going on here. And I did find that last line, Bill from the English fellow was questioning that ending. I did find that quite shocking because he uses the word sway.
Yeah,
Sway, as if he's on a dizzy height.
Yeah.
And Dante is, somebody mentioned Dante, the Inferno, the Purgatorio, the Paradiso, that all those levels are in here because you start at the bottom with the bus circling. And then when he gets to the top, he sees a stream of pilgrims. It's very ethereal and, like Renaissance art to see this stream of pilgrims heading to the top, and he follows them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much here to me. And I thought that last line just dangling out there, that last phrase, deciding which way to fall.
Yeah.
As if you had a choice, or I guess you can if you're going to commit suicide. But imperfect poem, but lots of material here to think about, maybe.
Thank you. Meredith?
Just a few things. I would agree that in formal terms, at least I find the poem unsatisfying. The line breaks don't quite make sense to me. But overall, I enjoy it very much. And I'm wondering, I'm glad you brought up the word sublime, because this is clearly a poem about seeking that in a natural phenomenon, in a natural landmark like Vesuvius, that has a mythic history, that has a history of spiritual significance. And I think everybody should be allowed to try to write those poems, because that's the important thing, to approach something that you don't understand, maybe can't understand, and also to seek that in nature, experiences that you can't quite verbalize. And I enjoy the vulgarity of the poem and the quotidianness of the poem very much, because it tempers all of that. It keeps us in this world and that world. But I just wondered if I detected a kind of a resentment of, oh, God damn it, yet another poem about the sublime. And I wanted to just put in a plug for a wonderful poem by Penelope Pelizon called Cliché. It's on Poetry Daily. You can find it online. It's about walking on the beach, but she acknowledges from the get-go that she is writing a cliché. And I think that's kind of a very brave and delightful stance to take. And he's doing something like that. That's all.
Oh, I'm so glad you're a fan of Penelope Pelizon. She just got a Guggenheim, and she's an old student of mine. So I'm I have been in awe of her for about 25 years. Kathy, do you know her? Ellen, do you know Penelope?
No, I'm just looking her up. I'm looking up that poem, and here it is.
Yeah, I think we can't quite take in a poem without seeing it. How does it begin?
It's back and forth ad nauseum, ought to make the sea a bore, but walks along the shore cure me. The salt wind's the best solution for dissolving my ennui in, along with these protean sadnesses that sometimes swim invisibly as comb jelly, a glass or two of wine below my surface. Some regrets won't untangle, others loosen as I watch the waves spreading their torn nets of foam along the sand to dry. I walk and walk and walk and walk, letting their haul absorb me. One seal's hull scuttled to bone staves, skulls scream wheeling above. And here, small, diabolical, a skate's egg case, its horned purse nested on pods of bladderwort that still squirt brine by the eyeful. Some oily slabs of whale skin, or no, just an edge of tire, flensed from a commoner leviathan. Elsewhere, plastic nurdles, whatever they are, gleam like pearls or caviar for the avian gourmand, and bits of sponge dab the wounded rack line, dried to froths of air smelling of iodine. Hours blow off down the beach like spindrift, leaving me with an immense, less solipsistic sense of ruin, and as if it's a gift, assurance of ruin's recurrence. I like that poem. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great on Whitman's
thank you.
description of the shore and the sea wreck.
I hear some Bishop in there too.
You know, when I was in England, I met a very interesting poet named Ian Macmillan. He's a sort of more popular poet, and he had spent several years collecting plastic from the ocean, and made an exhibit of all the little toys and bits and pieces, and it was fascinating. And that was a sort of another version of this sort of, that's what the ocean gives us now.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know him, Bill?
Yes, I do. I think he's a nice chap. I don't like his poems very much, but yeah.
Oh well.
Bonnie and then Yehudi.
Thank you. There's something that nobody's really talked about that for me has been part of the pleasure of the poem, which is the humor that's in it. I feel I'm really different in my sensibility toward this poem than many of the people who have spoken. But that funicular with the ladies, this seems quite Victorian to me, and the notion of them fanning off the volcano dust seems it's amusing to me. That fart in the face of the fascists also. Also Gregorio, who's gonna who sees himself the sketch of his charge, who has the audacity to think that the mountain is in his charge and he's the keeper of it. And he'll sign his book that he's eager to sell you.
With a little drawing as well.
With a little drawing as well. Mm-hmm. I think that letting off steam, still no place for a picnic, is kind of a understated and amused. That for me does not diminish the seriousness of the poem, but I see the narrator as someone who is not who in seeing these examples of capitalism is sort of well, there it is again, some more, they're exploiting this mountain to the best they can. But I think he feels sympathetic toward Gregorio and the bus driver. That's he maybe it's the magma rising, or maybe it's time for lunch. Those little sparkles of what I see as humor really humanize his disappointing pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yehudi, I agree with you, Bonnie.
Yes, I love the humor in it myself. For me, the poem is a metaphor for idealism and hope and aspiration for the highest values. And it ends in a total catastrophe, which is the explosion, which destroys much life and remains a myth for our time as well. That overall, that seems to me, with all the details, to be the overriding sentiment or thrust of the poem. And the last line I don't see as a literal thing at all, but just a metaphoric fall, the end of life, the fall of ideals, not the fall into the, falling into the abyss is the same if you're not religious and believe in the afterlife. So I love the poem, and I didn't in the beginning. And these, the enjambments and things like that, of course, I'm not aware of that because I'm not literate. But, well, really, I'm not. But the overall sentiment and the character of it, the references, the humor, and the idea of farting in the face of the fascists is ideal. First of all, the alliteration, but above all, where else are you going to fart? And this is, it's also appropriate to the area because it's around Anzio, around Naples, and the fascists were still there. We were fighting a very difficult and very destructive war in Italy.
Dan, and then Kathy. Dan, you're muted.
I'm not as familiar with poetry and poems as I'd like to be, and as many of you are. But it seemed that, I love this poem. I love also when I first heard him, the poet, at a holiday party we gave where people did silly things and they sang songs, and he read the Feast of San Gennaro, and I was so impressed that I told Sue that we should have this get together where he could read his poems. And to me, this poem, the poet in this poem is in mourning. He's in mourning for the world, for the fall from paradise. And he psychologically, it's very interesting because he uses humor to keep himself going in some way. And but it's a story of disappointment and mourning, maybe for his life, but for the world. And the ending seems to me kind of perfect because it's imperfect. It leaves us dangling, disappointed in a way that there isn't a better solution to this trip, this voyage up, this journey up the mountain. And so I think it's quite beautiful, but the melancholy and the mourning, you don't have to know about, I think, his personal illnesses to appreciate, I think, this poem.
Yeah, I would just add to that what we're offered at the end is not the triumphant reaching the heights, but the possibility of falling either one way or the other. And that's what we're stuck with, and that's what he's stuck with. Kathy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think I'm sort of agreeing with you and Dan. I think I always find this with myself, particularly with movies. Am I judging? Do I want a different movie, or has this movie done what it meant to? And I feel like this poem has done what it intended to. I don't really, I mean, I see it. Yeah, it's a kind of wry comment on our culture. But I see it as being mainly about the speaker, and he's kind of poking fun at his own romanticism until the end. And I think the end shows us where he is, and I've taken this journey with him, and that's why the end is moving to me. It's not like I don't think it's so much, it's about his, I don't know that he's looking for the sublime. Maybe he's looking for something and he doesn't find it and he's stuck. And I think that's a feeling I've often had. So yeah, maybe it doesn't kind of speak to us in this political moment in the way we wish it would because we need something. But I think in terms of what he set out to do, he accomplished it beautifully, and took me along with it so that at the end of the poem, I was moved by it.
Thank you. Denise?
Yes, hello. I had put in the chat that I don't I don't find the tawdry touristic elements of the poem to be a disappointment either for the writer or for me, but deeply droll. It is the laughter that's sublime. And one of the things that this poem makes me think of is that other great, much longer poem about pilgrimage, which is Chaucer's, which is full of humor and even very earthy humor. One of the characters, and I can't remember which one is described as being Somerville squamous of farting. And the other reference, it's Chaucer, but not the pilgrimage poem, but Troilus, who, brokenhearted, at the end dies. And when he ascends to the seventh sphere, he looks back down on the earth and laughs. And, all of his disappointments and heartbreak are as nothing because he's so far beyond that. Anyway, it's the Miller. Thank you, Ellen. I knew somebody in this room would know which character it was. Anyway.
It's Absalom in the Miller's Tale, I think.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You're any last words? This has been a very interesting and lively discussion, and with you always surprise me, and I'm fascinated by the range of responses to the poem, and I, that's what poetry does. Ellen, yeah.
And then John.
Oh,
Okay.
my poem is sort of extra textual. So if there is somebody who wants to say something more about the poem, that person should go first.
John?
Sure, John.
You want to?
Among the many things I really like about the poem is that wonderful juxtaposition between the mythic and the quotidian. And it is hilarious. I mean, people talk about the explosion on Vesuvius, and that the new explosion, when it comes, will melt down half of Naples. But it's followed by, or perhaps his stomach says it's time for lunch. And that sense of diffusing the seriousness, rather the mythic or the spectacular, also reminds me of stuff in Auschwitz, where they found graffiti that is just totally ridiculous to the time and place. And it just sort of just brings you to loving human nature and how solipsistic we are about everything. And so this captures, the poem captures that spirit. And so when you get up to the end of the poem, what else do we have except deciding where we want to fall?
Mm.
And and I'm really moved by that because Scott seems to understand that perfectly.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you. Meredith, before I get back to Ellen, I just want to say if you look at the poem if you look at the form of the poem as being in iambic pentameter, I think that helps you see what the line breaks are doing more clearly, or maybe that's what you were already doing, but that is one of the ways it works for me, that I see it as a kind of, contemporary, backward view to some kind of formal conversation, what Coleridge called a conversation poem, and having a kind of conversation with himself in that's both playful and then very serious, and that he actually uses the form of I think he actually uses the form of the poem to express both the humor and the real feeling, the real seriousness in the poem. Mike has his hand up. Ellen, do you want to wait, or do you want to say
I'll
what you?
wait.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, so I've heard what everyone says, and I'm glad to be in the minority. I don't think this is a powerful poem. I don't think he's innovating anything in the poem. I've seen all of this way back from the 90s and 80s in all the best Americans. And I'm sure I mean, it's not easy to write a poem. He's picked a great subject, but the language, the sentiment, I don't think I, there's nothing wrong with it. And you can be tickled if you want. Maybe it's the time right now. And I've always thought that poets and poetry that seems to be going over right now, when America goes back into a time, and we will, society, life, the economy is cyclical. There will be a time we will be facing very different circumstances, like in the 1930s, and a lot of the literature that tickles us today, I don't think is going to taste very good. That's what I'm getting. I think I'm getting it because I'm getting more serious of, no reason, no diagnosis, but about my own mortality. I have shed my youthfulness, but the political situation, and I think it's a good thing you bring this poem up today because we are in such a stagnation politically, and we can't do anything about where we are, which aggravates me to no end. Every morning, the problem keeps festering, and there is no address for it. There's no response for it, and we're pretty much, people are losing their faith in us around our traditional enemies. So, this is too much with me. I'd love to take your poem into a historical void and coddle it, but I can't. I can't. And today it flares with just too much of the indifference of America, the indifference, the sort of frivolousness that finally, yeah, it's a great cushion, it's a great indicator of humanity, but when you can't stop a bus that's going downhill over a cliff, I don't see where we're going with the economy. And again, I hate to drag all this in, but it may be an instance where a type of language and a type of sensibility and poetics that were very successful in its day will cease to work another time, or I don't know, but I'm happy to be in the minority here. I I don't feel like it's a successful poem for what it's proposing.
Ellen.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Mike. It made me think of a conversation called The Exchange that appears in the New Statesman that Ben Lerner is having with the interlocutor. And he talks about his protagonist in his first novel leaving the Atocha Station, which is actually a crib from John Ashbery's poem, and the young man on a fellowship in Spain is talking about art, and he says that he doesn't think that any art he can make is going to change the world we live in. But on the other hand, to live in a world without art would be so disturbing as to cause him to want to commit suicide. And one has to keep hoping that art will someday, along with other forces, transform the world so that we don't feel the way we do right now. It's a really interesting exchange. I will send it to Lloyd so he can share it with everyone. But what I was going to say is that I heard a really interesting Radiolab production on Vesuvius and the question of whether everybody in Pompeii died. Did anyone happen to hear it?
Yeah,
You did?
yeah, I did.
So he talks about this researcher, I think from the University of Maryland or someplace, wanted to figure out whether anyone had survived, and he used names from the surrounding towns to the south of Vesuvius to see if there were any names that were family names from Pompeii. Found no one. But then he started looking north of Pompeii, and he found names that were associated with Pompeii. And the kicker is capitalism again. There was, you heard it, Denise? He talks about garum, which is the sauce made from anchovies that was created in a town, I think it's called Coloratura di Alici, which is one of the nearby towns. And apparently the garum industry, which was in Pompeii, did get transported to these northern towns, which proves that some people actually did survive. But it's interesting that that capitalism in Pompeii was a key to finding out whether there was total annihilation of the population. So an interesting, as I said, extra textual note.
Yes, thank you. I want to go to a town called Coloratura.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have to let Marita go, and and thank you as always for being so generous with your time. And thank you all so much. This was a a bunch of new people today, and I hope you come back. Uh,
Definitely.
I'd love to hear what you have to say about other things. We don't usually do poems that are
Okay, thank you for telling me.
quite this contemporary, even 25 years ago, um, or a little more. And thank you all for your comments. This was a very lively discussion. As always, I learned from you, and I'm so grateful for that. And thank you again, Marita. So
Oh, my pleasure.